The Gemara from yesterday had to do with we concluded the Gemara that we had started earlier about the laws of Tuma and the rule about having a tefach of space, a handbreadth of empty space on top of a corpse, separating a corpse from a tent above it. That law we wanted to apply to the laws of Sukkah. In what way? It was going to be connected because there are laws of how you fill up. How can you fill up that space and consider it as if it is not just a temporary little fill, but it's actually considered legally as if it's filled up space. The different cases where you're mavatal it, if you verbally mavatal it, you verbally say that you're going to leave it there, and if you're going to, it depends what you're leaving there, if it's earth, if it's pebbles, if it's straw, and then we also spoke about if it's a mattress or a cushion or pillow. So what what works and what doesn't work, and this was all in order to minimize the space that's in your sukkah, because a sukkah that's too tall is not kosher, but maybe you could minimize it if you fill it up with something. But the way the Gemara's understanding is, in order to fill it up, it's got to be something that's going to be there that is considered batal. It's not just some temporary thing. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm standing on top of a chair, so now my sukkah is less than 20 amas tall because I'm standing on the chair and that's good enough." The chair is not batal, is not nullified to be considered the ground, and but earth could be considered the ground. And the question is, do you need to verbally nullify it or not? Straw, do you need to verbally nullify? We spoke about a machlokes between Rabbi Yossi and the rabbis, and that law, those laws of Tumah, with regard to nullifying something, would have seemingly apply. The Gemara understands that they would apply here as well. So the simplest scenario is that as long as it's not just to summarize the conclusion of that is that as long as it's not something that people don't nullify, like mattresses and cushions and things like that, as long as it's like earth and things that people would nullify, rocks, I guess pebbles and things. So then, as long as you verbally do it, you've covered all your grounds. You're planning on leaving it there. You're verbally nullifying it to your sukkah. Then you've definitely covered your ground and physically covered your ground. Now is now less than 20 amos, and you don't have to worry. The Gemara then spoke about the sukkah that's too tall, but there are hutzin that are below 20 amas. I mean, hutzin are the tips, the edges, the ends of the tops of the schach that seem to be hanging down within the 20 amas hollow area. And so in that scenario, maybe we could use them to minimize the sukkah and make it a kosher sukkah. And so the Gemara says that it depends on how the quantity of these hutzin, do they really kosher your sukkah with shade? Are they sufficient shade for your sukkah? And the Gemara said that if it's sufficient shade, means it has more shade than sunlight, then it would be kosher. And if not, then this would not minimize your sukkah. It would be considered almost like it's not there. And your sukkah is still considered a sukkah that's above 20 amas, and it's puzzle invalid. And then the Gemara said, well, let's compare that to the opposite case where you have a sukkah that's too small. And the reason it's too small is exactly 10 tfachim, 10 handbreadths tall. And the problem is that the schach is going in jutting into your living space. It's hardly a living space as it is. It's only 10 tefachim tall. And now you got schach hanging in. So does that minimize the size of the sukkah? So before we were talking about a sukkah that's too big, and we want to try to use the schach, the hutzin, to minimize the size of the sukkah. Here, we would like to not use the hutzin to minimize the sukkah. We would like it not to be considered schach, so that you could be considered kosher, a kosher sukkah. So the Abaye thought, well, let's use the same logic. If it's the sunlight that's coming from these, coming in, and it's more than the amount of shade, then the hutzin should not be considered as if they're there. We should consider them insignificant. And then we could say the sukkah is a 10 tfachim sukkah. However, if it's kosher schach, it's lower than 10 tfachim, meaning it's giving more shade than sunlight, then we're going to say that it's not a kosher sukkah because the schach is too low and it's not giving you living space of 10 tfachim. So it's not considered a kosher sukkah. That was Abaye's logic. When Rava says, "What are you talking about? Even if it's even if you want to consider the schach insignificant, nevertheless, it's still called a dira srucha. It's called a dwelling that is it is distasteful. It's not pleasant. It's not livable, basically. And why? Because even though it's not kosher schach, but practically speaking, you can't sit in that sukkah. So you got to look at the practical side of it, and that causes it not to be considered a teishvu ke'ein taduru. You got to dwell there like you would want to live. It's got to be livable, and you're supposed to be living in the sukkah like you would live in your house, and you can't. It's impossible to live in such a dira srucha, such a distasteful dira, such a unpleasant and lowly dwelling, and therefore it wouldn't be acceptable. Now, the simple understanding is it's invalid. But I did mention the Rambam holds that it's actually valid, but it's not l'chatchila. And I don't know if I mentioned yesterday, the reason why the Rambam wants to say that is connected to a Gemara that we're going to see further, Mitzvah Hashem, that it mentions what's the source of 10 tfachim. And because it mentions somewhere else the source of 10 tefachim, that seems to not fit with, in other words, if it's a dira srucha, if this is a reason to invalidate it, why do you need another source to invalidate 10 tefachim? So based on that would be a reason why the Rambam would say, well, that source, that is a source that invalidates if it's less than 10 tefachim. But this tells you that if it's that the schach that is lower, that causes you to be a dira srucha, this is not a invalid sukkah. This is just because here you could consider it that it's 10 tefachim tall because the schach is insignificant, but at the same time it's still a dira srucha. So this would be a reason why it's l'chatchila, you shouldn't dwell in it. Anyway, in other words, according to, if you want to learn that this is invalidating the sukkah, so then this should for sure invalidate it if the walls are not 10 tefachim tall, right? This should be a good enough reason. So it must be that Rava is just saying this more of a lechatchila preferable, don't dwell in this sukkah. So that would be the reason for the Rambam, something along those lines. Okay, now yesterday Ezra had mentioned a understanding here from the Sefaria. I didn't see anything different than the way I looked at Sefaria. It seemed like it was exactly how I learned it. So I'm not exactly sure if I was reading. I mean, it was quite late, so maybe I read it too fast. But that seemed like the pshat that we gave was what I saw in the Sefaria. So do you want to ask the question again, Ezra, or did you look at it again? And what I can't hear you, Ezra. You're muted.
The way you're explaining it was that the tips of the fronds were falling into the sukkah,
Mhm.
and I was understanding it that the tips were falling outside of the sukkah.
Uh-huh. And so let me pull up Safaria again. Just
But
make sure.
I mean, that was the way I was understanding it. But I don't think Sfard talks about the fact that it's falling into the sukkah. They just mention tips of the fronds.
Uh-huh. So in other words, it's not from the Safaria part, it's more just the translation. So let me just think of how you're trying to learn it. Maybe let's see. So the Hutzin are Yordin Besoich Esrim Amma.
Yeah.
So
So that could
what
mean either outside or inside the sukkah.
uh-huh. Okay, so let's say it means outside the sukkah, different than the way I learned it. So now in the sukkah, it's above 20 amas, but outside the sukkah, there are hutzin that are lower. And I understand why you're thinking that way, because when you put fronds on, the ends of the fronds are often outside of the sukkah, right? That's probably why you're thinking that way. Okay, so then the question would be, do you have walls? Like what are we gonna permit over there? The sukkah or out? You want to sit outside the sukkah against the wall of the sukkah? What would they be saying then?
When I think about the way that I was thinking about it versus what you're saying, in order for it for you to sit inside the sukkah, my case would not make sense.
Uh-huh. Right. Okay. Fine. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure we covered. Okay. So that's the Gemara about a having schach that's too tall, it's too high up, and what are the ways of making fixing this sukkah? And the two so far we came up with two options. One is with nullifying, filling in the earth, filling in the earth with stuff, different things that we discussed. And the other is maybe the hutzin could be you could have the ends of the schach. If it's enough, that could minimize the size of the sukkah. And of course, on the side, we mentioned what about a small sukkah? Now the Gemara says, what about building a platform? So here comes the next Gemara, and we are on page 4a,
Right.
right in the middle of the page. And the Gemara begins, Haisa Gavoya Meyesrim Amma. Must be about maybe 18 lines from the top, I guess. 5, 10, 15. Yeah, about 18 lines from the top. If it's Haisa Gavoya Meyesrim Amma, if the sukkah is higher than 20 amas, Uvanaba Itztava, and he built a platform. Now, the platform he's building the platform Keneged doifen ha'imtzai al pnei kula. He's building the platform along the middle wall. The 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 sukkah we're talking about has three walls. So there's the right wall, the left wall, and the middle wall. And the fourth wall is not a wall, it's a doorway, basically. It's an opening. So there's no wall, and that's the common sukkah. It's the easiest sukkah to build. You don't have to even build anything for the fourth wall, according to Torah, according to halacha. It's a kosher sukkah. I know there are, according to Chassidus, I think there's a chumrah to, there's some inyan to have four walls. But according to halacha, the letter of the law, three walls is fine. Even less than three walls is fine. And here you have this three-wall sukkah. So the middle wall. So again, we're dealing with the sukkah. The schach is too high, and so you're building along the middle wall this type of a platform. Rashi says a platform of stone or of cement. And Rashi mentions that it's reaching both of the ends. In other words, it's reaching the right end, it's touching the wall on the right side, and it's touching the wall on the left side. Now, it's not reaching the entrance. It's not going that far. It could go that far. If you wanted to do that, that would be great. But even if it's not doing that, we're going to say that this is going to work. So you built this keneged doifen emtzai along the middle wall, and al pnei kula, it's along the entire middle wall, touching the right wall and the left wall, and fully covering the middle wall. And you have this platform there. And the Gemara says the yesh ba hechsher sukkah. It also needs to have the minimum size of a sukkah, and the minimum size of a sukkah, which we've learned, is 7 tfachim by 7 tfachim. It's interesting. Rashi here says 7 tfachim and a drop. Umashu. All the commentaries, they struggle to grapple with this Rashi. And Rashi seems to say this not once, but more than there's a place later he mentions this, the 7 tfachim and a drop. Like, why does it have to have that extra drop? We've always learned, and in Shulchan Aruch it talks about 7 hand breadths, not 7 hand breadths and a little more, and the mashu. But Rashi mentions that anyway. But the bottom line is Roshai Rubai and Shulchanai, like we've learned, that we follow Beis Shammai. That's the head, the majority of the body, the table. So basically, you have this this platform that can handle. It's the size of a minimum sukkah, 7 by 7, 7 a drop by 7 and a drop. And the Gemara says the main word kshera. It is kosher. So you've now minimized the sukkah and you've kashered it. Now, what about eating or sleeping in the area that's beyond the itztaba, beyond the platform? Anyone have any thoughts about that? Eating on the platform, so your sukkah is not anymore 20 amas, above 20 amas, because you're sitting on the platform. From the platform to the ceiling is less than 20 amas. So your sukkah is less than, again, the platform is considered like the ground. And so you measure from the platform, the top of the platform, to the schach, it's less than 20 amas. You're all set. You now have a kosher sukkah. What about the area that's beyond the platform? Again, the sukkah is, let's say, an 8 by 8 sukkah. Typical 2 by 4 is 8 feet, let's say. So you got your 8-foot sukkah, 8 by 8. And the platform is only 4 by 8. So it's half the sukkah. It's covering half the sukkah. I'm just giving a simple example. your platform is covering half the sukkah. The schach, unfortunately, is very high, so you got yourself into this problem. You made too high of a sukkah, but you figured out what to do. You put a platform, it's covering half the sukkah. Now your sukkah is like a big step in the middle of the sukkah, which is the platform. And that's where you're definitely allowed to eat on that platform. But what about eating in the other half of the sukkah that doesn't have the platform? Would that be allowed or not? So you're probably going to say you're not allowed because it's above 20 amos, right? That would be logical. Rashi tells us that no, you're even allowed to sit or sleep, dwell in the area that's beyond. And Rashi brings a source from page 19. He says, Psal hayotzi min sukkah nidon kasukkah. That schach that goes outside of a sukkah is considered kosher schach, even though it has no walls. That once you have a kosher sukkah and your schach continues traveling without any walls, that, or without, or depending on the rule, the technical details, but if the schach continues, so that schach, that psal is yotzei min sukkah, it's continuing out of the sukkah. There are scenarios where it's acceptable, it's kosher. And Rashi wants to say that same law would apply here. You got the itztaba, which koshered your sukkah. So the half of the sukkah that by the platform is kosher because it's less than 20 amos high. And guess what? Now the schach continues afterwards. And even though that schach is more than 20 amos high, it's considered a continuation of the sukkah.
Rabbi,
the understanding would be that it's like we consider the platform to be moved to extend. Yes, David.
I have a picture, but I don't know if it's going to work if I share it. If I push share, will my picture come up?
Not unless you put whatever you have up against your screen.
No, it's a picture.
No. It's online. It depends if it's the only thing opened or if it's one. You could try it. If you want to try it, you could try it. Just press share screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Share screen. And do you see that frame as one of the options of your share screen? You should have a few different share screen options. In other words, after you press share screen, whatever's on your computer should shoot up in front of you and give you the
screen.
Which screen you want to share. Do you see the one that you want to share?
Screen. Let's try that.
Okay. Doesn't seem like it's going.
No.
Did you find the screen? Because do you see that screen that you want to share? Did it pop up when you press share screen?
No, what popped up is it says Zoom.
Oh. All right. Well, anyway.
A very simple picture. Everybody can imagine it. You just have to look at it as if you're looking from the top of the sukkah down, like an aerial picture.
Oh, here, David, maybe yeah, but I don't know. The shared content is fit to your screen. You see? Yeah, no, it's that's not what you want. What you want to do is open it up right behind the Zoom. You want to open up your. Okay, great.
Right there.
Okay, thank you. Yes, David, you figured it out. Wow. So here, this is the case that we're talking about. Can you see my cursor over here? Oh, you don't see it. Okay, so the picture on the left is the platform that's along the middle wall. And what I'm sharing with you is an insight from Rashi that says, of course, to dwell on the platform is a kosher sukkah because your schach is not 20 amos high. From the platform, it's only 10 amos high. Platform is nice and big platform, and you've now koshered your sukkah by the fact that you built a platform there, you minimize the height, and it's a great sukkah. However, what about outside of the platform? So outside of the platform, Rashi wants to say, and some of the Rishonim disagree with this. They say this is not valid, but Rashi wants to say you're even allowed to sit and dwell and sleep in this area where it's where there's no platform, even though the schach is too high, it's over 20 amas. Nevertheless, it falls into a category of pasal hayotze min sukkah, of a sukkah that extends. A kosher sukkah is considered kosher even after it loses some of its elements that make it kosher. If it extends, you could still use the extension of it. So here, the original part of the sukkah is kosher, and the fact that it extends, even though it's above 20 amos, we're going to consider that to be a kosher sukkah as well. So again, this is a debate among the commentaries, and Rashi wants to say that it works. Okay, let's stop the share screen, David, if you want to on the top. You could stop the share screen, and there should be some button on the top that says stop share. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Back to normal. Okay. Thank you, David. So that was a picture for anyone that wanted a picture. The newer Gemaras actually have the picture in it inside the Gemara. I don't know if the old ones do. I have this newer Gemara, so I don't know.
The old ones have a line drawing.
Okay. So let's continue over here. So we've now talked about the argument in the Rishonim if you can extend that sukkah even beyond the platform. And now comes the next case. And the next case is where the middle, the platform is not going to be in the middle. The platform is going to be on the side. Let's continue in the Gemara. Umin hatzad. And if you have the platform from the side, im yesh misfas itztabala kaisel dalet amayis psula. So now, if you build that platform, instead of building it by the middle wall, you build it by the side wall. So now the platform is covering, let's say, the left wall completely, and a little bit of the middle wall, and none of the right wall. So the platform seemingly doesn't have three walls to it. If you want to sit on top of that platform with your table and eat in your sukkah, you say, well, I'm in a sukkah that's less than 20 amas. The question would be, but what about your walls? Do you have 2.5 walls, which is the minimum amount of walls? You need 2.5 walls. Not really. You have one wall. You have partially a second wall, which we could call another wall, a second wall. The middle wall is, you're not covering the whole wall, but at least the platform goes halfway, let's say. So you've got a second wall. Your sukkah consists of 2 walls. 2 walls is not enough for a sukkah. So you may say, well, this is not going to work. The Gemara says, well, it depends. We might be able to consider the third wall as part of your sukkah. And that would depend on if there's how far of space there is between the platform and the third wall. So it says that there's 4 amas, handbreadth, 4 cubits, which is 6 to 8 feet. If you have that much space, then it would ruin it and it won't work. It's not a kosher sukkah. You've tried to minimize the height of your sukkah, but it didn't work because you put the platform in the wrong place. However, pachas me'arba amas, but if you have less than 4 amas from the platform to the opposite side wall, again, your platform is on the left wall, and now you're measuring from the left wall to the right wall, from the end of the platform to the right wall, So if you have less than arba amos, 4 cubits, then it's kshera, it is kosher. And this is a very interesting law. It's called doifen akuma. Doifen akuma means the wall is bent. What does that mean? How do we fix this problem? You really don't have more than 2 walls. So how are we correcting the problem? So there's a special law given to Moses at Sinai that we are able to consider a wall to be bent when it falls under the category of, with regard to a sukkah, that if it's less than 4 amos, it falls into the technical limits. So you can now consider the wall together with the schach on top that's above 20 amos not to be really a just attached to your sukkah, but really that is a wall of your sukkah, including the wall and the schach. So it means your sukkah is now a sukkah that has 3 walls to it. What do you mean it has 3 walls? My sukkah only has 2 walls because the platform ends halfway down the middle wall. I don't have the 3rd wall. But the answer is no, you do have a 3rd wall, because we look at the right wall as if the right wall is an L-shaped wall. It goes all the way up to the ceiling and it bends all the way over until the platform, and that schach is part of a wall. And if you look at it that way, you now have a 3rd wall, because the wall on the left is right there, you see it. The wall in the middle is right there, you see it. And the wall on the right is a wall that is bent over and includes the schach on top. And now you have a bent wall sukkah, a sukkah that is 3 walls, and it's called doifen akuma, and you can dwell now on the itztaba, on the platform. Again, the limit here of doifen, of this special law, halacha l'moshe misinai, the special tradition given to Moses, is that it has to be within 4 amos. We don't consider it a bent wall if it's too far away. Does anyone use this law nowadays? Sure, we do, all the time. This law of doifen akuma is used all the time nowadays because many people have overhangs. And that overhang that they use is often used as a doifen akuma. It's a bent wall. So let's say as long as your overhang is not 6 feet, then people use that as the 3rd wall or the middle wall of their sukkah. They attach their sukkah to their house, and the middle wall is their house often. That's often how it's done. And they put 2 walls on the side, and now you have your middle wall, your house is the middle wall, but there's an overhang. And if you and the overhang seemingly is a big problem, that because now your wall is not attached to your sukkah. You have an overhang, let's say of 4 feet, and your sukkah has 2 walls on the 2 sides, and the middle wall that you want to use, the wall of your house, is 4 feet away from your sukkah. So how do you have a kosher sukkah? The answer is doifen akuma. You have a bent wall over there. Your wall that includes the puzzle schach, the overhang, which is invalid schach, is actually counted as the middle wall of your sukkah, and your sukkah is now a kosher sukkah. You don't need to make a wall on the opposite side, because you have a 3-walled sukkah. It's a kosher sukkah. No questions about it. It's kosher, and it's under the law of doifen akuma, even though the middle wall is far away from your sukkah. Nevertheless, it's less than 6 feet, and less than 6 feet is for sure a kosher, a doifen akuma. You have a bent wall, and you now have a kosher sukkah, and we consider that wall attached to your sukkah.
It sounds like you're cheating by calling the roof a wall.
So that is it's one of those special rules that Hashem gives us to be able to use. It's not a loophole. This is the Torah says we consider it that way. This is considered a kosher sukkah. This is part of the laws of what a wall is. It's interesting. They compare the loopholes in Yiddishkeit. The discussion always comes. What about all these loopholes that the rabbis come up with? Is that similar to the tax laws with all the loopholes? And the answer is very different. The loopholes of Yiddishkeit, Hashem specifically made those loopholes because it's meant to be a permit. These scenarios is permitted. When it comes to tax laws, the reason why there are loopholes is because the lawyers were not able to figure out ways of writing, or whoever wrote the laws, they weren't able to cover all their bases and limit it, and they couldn't. And the smarter lawyers were able to always find things that they missed out. So it was all by mistake. But the Torah loopholes are meant to be there because these are permit. These are acceptable. This is an acceptable sukkah. It's a kosher sukkah because Hashem specifically permitted a doifen akum. So it's can't really use the word loophole.
So it sounds like you're saying you need 3 walls, but if you have 2 walls and a roof, that's 3 walls.
Yeah, the only thing is I'm not really limiting it. We'll soon see that you don't really need any walls.
Great.
We'll soon see that this law applies even in other scenarios, that you could even make all of your walls doifen akumas, which would basically mean you have no walls physically that are close to your sukkah, but according to halacha, you do have walls, and your walls are just bent walls.
So
now
I can sit outside, but if I have a good roof and a little bit of an overhang from the roof, a couple feet on one side, couple feet on the other side, I'm sitting outside, but my roof is suspended in midair. I'm sitting in the sukkah.
But Rabbi, there are people who have holes above their living rooms in which they have, the schach above that hole, and then they have to use that in order for the walls from the living room, the 4 walls from the living room, to actually make it a kosher sukkah, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. So people do that, right? It's not so common, I don't think, as much as using the overhang. It's quite an expensive way of building your house to have a hole in your living room. But I've seen it once, maybe, I don't know. But it's definitely not so. I'm not aware of it being so common. But yeah, that would be and our Gemara gives such a case in just a moment. Yeah. Yes, Jeffrey.
So our shul had a storeroom built onto it, and that's exactly what I had for many years till we had enough money to build an outside sukkah, and it opened up. It was built so that the storeroom could open up on the top, and and that's where the schach was, but none of the walls of the storeroom was really close.
But it was less than 6 feet.
Yes, and that's why we used it for many years, and but then finally somebody donated monies, and we had room outside of the building, and we built a regular sukkah with a platform and everything. So it was a very nice change. But that's the only way we had it. And I guess there's a time when people were probably afraid to build the sukkah, so that it was visible to everybody outside.
No, it's true. You didn't want to give non-Jews reasons.
So there's in fact, we lost some of our property to eminent domain because they built a city housing project behind the school, and so that might have been one of the reasons why they kept this.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah. So okay. So now the Gemara goes into this. Now I do want to just mention that there is one other way of explaining the law of Doifen Akuma. I explained one of the ways of understanding the mechanism of how it works, the logic behind it, was that the wall is actually a bent wall, which fits with the wording very well. That the wall becomes an L shape, a 90-degree angle, and you include the schach is part of the wall, and the wall is the wall, and so altogether you have a wall that reaches up to your schach. There is another way of understanding the law of Doifen Akuma, in that the wall that is 4 feet away, or 5 feet away, or 2 feet away, or 1 foot away. Thank you. That wall we put next to, we consider it next to the kosher schach. So we, in other words, we move the wall. It's not that the wall is bent, it's that we move the wall. And moving the wall over, in other words, we imagine as if the wall is moved over to the kosher schach. So that would be the other understanding of the logic behind it. Now, I'd like to just do the Rashi over here. Rashi, about 8 lines or 10 lines from the bottom, he says less than 4 amos is kosher. She'av hu huchsher al yoda, Rashi says, because then it also is kosher through the platform. The kaimalan, because we have a accepted rule, halacha l'Moshe miSinai, a tradition. The machsharinan sukkah al yedei akimas doifen ad arba amos chaser mashu, that we kosher a sukkah through bending the wall to up to 4 amos. V'royan schacha elyon hamachuber l'doifen, and we look at the above schach that is attached, that is the above, the schach above, that is connected to the doifen haracha, to the far away wall, ki'ilu hu min ha-doifen atzmoi, as if it's part of the wall itself, the okom, and it's just bent ad sfas, ad connected sfas, so it's until the edge of the platform. The kan moidedin es goivhon, and here we calculate the height misfas ha'itzdaba ulamayla, from the edge of the platform and above. In other words, so you have less than 20 amos, which makes it kosher. And even though from below it, it extends towards the outside. Since at the top it doesn't stop, therefore this is considered it's hollow. And the height of the sukkah has become minimized because of this itztaba. What I see from what I'm bringing out from Rashi is the way he's explaining the law of Doifen Akuma is very practical, the literal, I should say, very literal understanding of the wall, that it becomes bent, that the wall is physically bent as in like a 90-degree angle wall, and it permits the sukkah to have 3 walls. The end of Rashi did not read as smoothly. I just want to read it one more time. So V'kan moidedin as goivhan misvaso itztabo l'mayla. Here we we measure the height of the sukkah from the edge of the itztaba, in other words, the top of the itztaba, the top of the platform and above. So it's a kosher sukkah because you've minimized the height. And even though under this place, Shemitachtav, the wall is above 20 amos. In other words, if you where the wall ends, that area is above 20 amos. Since the top of the wall doesn't end there, rather it goes all the way to the platform. Therefore, we measure the height to the height of the platform. And what Rashi is explaining now, the first time around, I didn't really explain the end of Rashi properly. What Rashi is saying is, how can you consider this wall to be a wall that's less than 20 amos? And what Rashi explains is that we look at the wall, we measure it only from, even though this far away wall is more than 20 amos. That's what's bothering Rashi at the end. He says the wall that's further at the end is really bigger than 20 amos. But he says, since we're looking at the whole wall and we're bringing the entire wall, the L shape, all the way to the platform, so we measure it from the platform and above, and it's less than 20 amos. So he says that's considered the kosher sukkah, no problem. And you have the concept of doifen akum. Okay, so basically, going to go back now to the Gemara, and the Gemara said that we have a concept of doifen akum. The Gemara is bothered. The Gemara is now going to be bothered with the fact that, why do you have to tell me this? It's a Mishnah. And this Mishnah really talks about a case that's very similar to what Ezra mentioned, that you have a room where you have like a hole in the middle of the room, of the roof, and that would be considered a kosher sukkah. So the Gemara says, Tanina, we learned this in a Mishnah. Oh, a line before. My Komash Malan, what are you coming to let us hear? The Amrina and Doifen Akuma, that you say this law of Doifen Akuma, that a bent wall is kosher. Tanina, we learned it in a Mishnah. Bayis Shenivchas, a house that has a hole in the roof. V'sikech al gabav, and so you put a schach on top of it, or like either means the entire roof caved in, or some of the roof caved in. It doesn't clarify what nifchas is. Nifchas, it's missing the house that it's missing some roof, but seemingly you could translate it as the entire roof caved in. So v'sikech, or majority of the roof caved in, or one wall, at least some of the walls, some of the roof caved in. V'sikech al gabav, so you put schach on top of it. So im yesh min hakoisa l'sikoch, if you have from the wall to the schach dalet amos, four amos, then it's pasul psula. Hapachas mikan kshera, but less than that would be kosher. So the understanding of that Mishnah is that there's a law of doifen akum, that we can allow a sukkah that doesn't have one of the walls close to it, as long as that wall is less than 4 amos away, it could be attached. We can consider it a kosher sukkah, even though there's roof. That roof is not kosher schach. Nevertheless, we look at the entire roof, the entire area of that roof that's not kosher schach, as if it's a wall. It's a bent wall. So the Gemara says, "Ma'u the tema." So the Gemara is asking, why are we giving this law here? It would seem that this is pretty much mentioned in the Mishnah about this law of Doifen Akuma. So the Gemara answers and says, Mahu de Tema. You may have said, Hasam over there, who the chazya l'doifen over there, the roof caved in. So the you want to count the wall and connect the wall to the schach over there. It's a good wall. Hasam hu dechazia l'daifen. There, it's a good wall, so you can connect it to the schach. Aval hacha delay chazia l'daifen. Here, it's not fit to be a wall because it's too tall. Maybe I would say emaloi. I would say maybe it's not kosher because this wall is over 20 amos. And the Gemara answers that that's why we mentioned this law over here to tell you that even though the Mishnah doesn't make it clear that if it's above 20 amos, it works. We are now mentioning it here in the Gemara that above 20 amos type of wall, that also works for Daifen Akuma. So it says, Emaloi, I would say it doesn't work. Kamash Malan, it comes and lets us hear that it does work. That you could even use the law of Daifen Akuma to permit a sukkah for us to permit a sukkah that's above 20 amos tall. Using that method of Daifen Akuma, that's how it permits it. In other words, without the law of Daifen Akuma, you would have two problems. Here we're fixing two problems. Number one, you're fixing a problem that the wall is not close to the sukkah. The sukkah in that area is above 20 amos. And number one, the wall is far away. Number two, the wall is above 20 amos. So you have two issues. And so what we're doing is connecting the wall with the schach to be considered that it's within 20 amos. We're not just connecting the wall, but we're connecting the wall and lowering it, making it considered a kosher wall. And that is what the Gemara is saying is a little different than the case over there where we're more connecting. In other words, here we're really connecting, we're really koshering a wall that's too tall. There we're really connecting a wall that's far away from the schach. Here we're koshering a wall that's too high. So I don't know if you want to say that it's fixing two problems. Although it is really, but the main thing is that it's correcting a wall that's too high, and it's sort of fixing a different problem than it's explained than we have over there. Now, because it's too high, then that's why it's considered that it's far away. So you're really fixing two problems. It's far away because it's too high, and you're making it not so high. So you are really fixing two problems. And in that Mishnah, you're really only fixing one problem, that it's too far away. So the Gemara says, but it still works. You could use the law of Daifen Akuma that it will be considered that you have fixed the wall, even though the wall is physically or literally too tall. Now, the next case is Haisa Gavaya Michafam. What happens if the sukkah is more than 20 amos high? Uvana itztaba b'emtzis, and you built a platform in the middle of the sukkah, not touching any of the walls. You just stuck a platform in the middle. So here you have the case that David was talking about. If you could count each wall from the platform, so if there's 4 amos to each side, the whole ruch psula, it's puzzle, it's invalid. Less than 4 amos is kosher. And the Gemara says, "My komash, what are you coming to let me hear? Damin Daifen Akuma, that you say Daifen Akuma, hainu hach. That's the previous case. We know you say Daifen Akuma." And the Gemara answers, "Mao de tema." I would have thought to say, I would have said that Daifen Akuma is meiruach achas. I mean, you can only say it one wall. You can bend the wall. Aval kol ruach, but ruach, you're gonna make your whole sukkah Daifen Akuma? The Gemara says, yeah, I would think loy, you can't do that. Kamash malan, that yes, you could, comes and lets us hear that you could even do the entire sukkah, a sukkah of Daifen Akuma. So what we have here is a number of cases that we've koshered the sukkah. We've made it kosher. We figured out a way, a method to make it kosher, and all of with regard to having a platform. And the simplest platform was the platform that was flush with the two side walls and the back wall, the middle wall. And that platform, we said, according to Rashi, you could even continue that sukkah even beyond, it extends even beyond the actual platform. And the reason is because of Sal Hayotzim and Sukkah, that we extend a kosher sukkah to go beyond that. Then the next case was a case of a itztaba, a platform that's on the side, and there we said this special law of doifen akuma. Now the special law of doifen akuma, interestingly enough, in this scenario, I want to just clarify that what Rashi said earlier doesn't work. Here, we're going to make the schach into a wall, and we're going to kasher the sukkah. Even though it only has two walls, we're going to say that third wall will attach to the sukkah because we're going to bend the schach. It's all part of a wall. So are you allowed to sit under a wall? The schach is above 20 ames. You want to sit in that area that is extended after the platform ended. So on the platform, you got three walls, two literal walls next to you, and the third wall is an extended wall that's called a bent wall, a doifen akuma, and it's counted part of your sukkah. You're sitting on the platform and you're eating and you're fulfilling the mitzvah of sukkah. What about sitting beyond that platform? There, you can't say the same thing that, oh, I'm going to sit beyond the platform and pesel hapsala yotzim in a sukkah. You have the schach that extends from the sukkah should be kosher. You can't say it over there. Why not? Because there you're sitting under a wall. If you're sitting under a wall, that's not a kosher sukkah. We're calling that a wall. If we're calling it a wall, then it's not considered kosher. The other case, we're not calling it a wall. Here we're coming onto the law of doifen akuma. You're coming onto it, you're considering it a wall, then you can't sit under it. What about sitting? Well, let me ask a different question. Now, what about that platform is next to the left wall, and it extends to the back wall. So you got your two walls, and you have your doifen akuma third wall, which is the right wall, which we're bending and considering. And what about if that platform doesn't extend all the way to the front entrance of the sukkah? Can you sit outside of the platform towards the front of the sukkah? Would that be a kosher sukkah? Because that wall, we don't use the law of doifen akuma. That area is not under a bent wall. The other side is under a bent wall, but in front of the platform towards the entrance, that's not under a bent wall. That's an area where it's an extension of your kosher sukkah. So there you would actually be allowed to sit. It's above 20 ames, your schach. But it's psal hayotzim min sukkah. It's an extension of your sukkah. That's okay. But you want to sit on the side of the platform? That's under the roof. You're sitting under a wall. There, you're sitting under a wall. That won't be kosher. This is brought in Shulchan Aruch, so maybe we'll pull up the Shulchan Aruch maybe tomorrow. Anyway, Zai Gesund. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.